Welcome back, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. Today, I would love to welcome Rob Schwartz. Is the son and editor of his father's new book on aging titled The Wisdom of Morrie. He has many years of experience as a journalist, music film producer, and entrepreneur. His father, Morrie Schwartz, passed from ALS at 78. The beloved subject of the classic multi-million copy #1 bestseller Tuesdays with Morrie explores the life questions by Morrie in a profound, poetic, and poignant masterpiece of living and aging joyfully and creatively. Later life can be filled with many challenges, but it can also be one of the most beautiful and rewarding passages in anyone's lifetime. Welcome, Rob Schwartz, to A Little Less Fear podcast.
Thank you so much. Very, very happy to be here.
And it's nice that you're here in LA, not too far away from me. Sometimes I get guests from all over the world, Thailand, or even just across the United States, Pennsylvania. So it's really interesting to know that our energies are connecting really close by to each other. Welcome to LA.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I have a lot of international experience, so we can talk about that as well, including Thailand.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's incredible. Hey, Rob, this is really fascinating that you've come across your father's writing and that you are now encouraged and motivated to talk about your father and his life and everything that he went through with aging up until his passing. But before we talk about his book, what brought you to your motivation into bringing his book into light?
Right. Wow, it's a broad question. I feel like there's so many different ways I could answer it. I mean, obviously, I grew up with my dad. I was extremely influenced by him. We were very, very close. And I always thought that, he was a wise man and he had a lot to say and a lot of very insightful things about life. And then all of a sudden, right at the end of his life, a lot of people will know the story from Tuesdays with Morrie. He started to get all this media attention. And then after he passed away, Tuesdays with Morrie was not published till after he passed away. He became an international celebrity. I mean, Tuesdays with Morrie is in 40 different languages. It's sold over 20 million copies. It's considered the best-selling memoir of all time, which still blows my mind just to say that. There's many other aspects to it. There's a play, there's a movie. The play is performed all over the world, and I've done Q&A after the play all across this country and all across the world. So I was very used to talking about my father and, his insights and his wisdom. And obviously, I feel like he has a lot to offer people. And that was very evident also in his lifetime. I mean, it's not like it all happened at the very end of his life. He used to counsel students. He was a professor at Brandeis University outside of Boston, and he used to counsel students. He opened a low/no cost mental health collective in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where they treated people for no money or very, very little money all the way back in the 70s, because he figured that it wasn't really right that only people who had a lot of money could get mental health care, which is how it used to be. Now, insurance will cover, therapy and stuff like that. Didn't used to be that way, right? Used to
Right.
be insurance only covered strictly, bodily medical things. And if you didn't have $100 or $200 an hour to pay a therapist, you couldn't get therapy. So he started a low, no cost mental health collective. And, he was helping people his whole life. So it's not like this is something new. But Tuesdays with Morrie allowed him to be seen by a whole worldwide audience. And this manuscript, which we've published now, called The Wisdom of Morrie, Living and Aging Vibrantly and Joyfully, is really an extension of Tuesdays with Morrie. His ideas are much more analyzed because, my father was a university professor. The book is easily readable by everybody, but it goes a lot deeper into the ideas that he presents in Tuesdays with Morrie, and analyzes them, looks at them from a lot of different angles, and uses a lot of different types of writing. My father didn't want this book just to be his voice going on and on, so he uses stories and newspaper clippings and quotes from books and quotes from other writers and poetry. He loved poetry, so I'm very happy to hear that you were inspired to write a poem. And there's a lot of poetry in the book, right? So Yeah, it was just natural when I rediscovered this manuscript to think that people would benefit from this. And really, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but this was written 30 years ago. And when you read it, it really could have been written yesterday. It's so prescient, so talking about issues that people have in their lives today and the way society is today, which we can, dissect. It's about ageism and the term that he coined, age casting, and how pernicious and sort of poisonous it is to think in that mindset.
I would love to talk about age casting, but before we talk about age casting, you discovered, let's go back to how you discovered his manuscript. How did that come to be? Were you just digging around and just coincidentally found it? Were you specifically looking for something about your father?
Right. So actually, to tell that story, we have to go back even further because I did discover this manuscript and I'll tell that story, but I actually knew about it and knew the content pretty well because way back when I was a pretty young man, I had just finished a long trip around Asia, which we can talk about it. I have a lot of experience in Asia, and I was living at home for the last time under the same roof as my parents. This is the summer of 1989. I was preparing to move to Japan. And I lived at home for the last time. And this is exactly the time that my father started to write this book in the summer of 1989. So, we were very close. We often, talked about intellectual ideas and what we were doing in our lives. So I talked to him a lot about this book and what he wanted to communicate and why he thought it was important to write it. And, in some ways, he really thought this was like his life's work, his big last thing that he was going to write. He was in his 70s when he started writing this book. And then I moved to Japan. And of course, I still maintained great touch with them. But a few years after that, as a lot of people will know, he got ill, he developed ALS. I shuttled between Tokyo and Boston, but of course, my father passed away in 1995 of ALS. And Mitch then wrote Tuesdays with Morrie and published it 97, 98. It became a huge bestseller. That whole phenomenon took off. And some years after that, maybe 4 or 5 years after that, as you mentioned at the top of the program, I'm a journalist, among other things. So I used to go between Tokyo and Boston and sit at my father's desk and write the pieces that I needed to submit to newspapers and magazines based in Japan and around the world. And one day I was just sitting at my father's desk thinking, oh, I wonder what are in these desk drawers, because my mother kept his study exactly as it had been when he was alive, which meant filled with books, all the books that he liked to read and thought were important to discover, pushing forward into new territory, and also his field, which was social psychology and sociology. And so one day I just pulled open a desk drawer and saw this big black bound thing, like much bigger than a regular book. I actually have it around here somewhere.
Wow.
And I went, what is this? So I flipped open this hard cover, very firm cover, not like a paperback book or anything like that. It was just black, had no writing on it. And I looked at it and I realized it was the manuscript that he wrote from about 89 to 92, which had never been published. And I realized, firstly, of course, I knew what was in it because I had talked to him. And then we had a great opportunity now to publish this because of Tuesdays with Morrie had focused so much attention on him. And of course, I had to read it from cover to cover to make sure that I thought it was worthwhile. And of course, it's fabulous. It talks about a lot of issues from many, many different angles. It explores things that are really meaningful in people's lives. Both, not everything is, peaches and sunshine. He talks about all sorts of issues which trouble people and try and give them a way through it. He was a psychologist as well as a sociologist, so he really had deep insight into how people thought and how it affected their feelings and stuff, and he weaves that into the writing. So, to answer your question, I had a lot of motivation to publish it, but it did take me a very long time because, first of all, as I mentioned, I was living in Tokyo. I had a very full career there, and we can talk about that if you like. And I was going back and forth between Japan and the US. And my mother was a big part of this equation as well. My mother had actually edited most of, if not all of, well, let's say most of my father's important academic work. And I actually include an essay in this book about my mother and her relationship to my father and his academic work. And since she had edited so much of his stuff, she sort of put me on the right track, and we discussed editing. She did a couple of sample pages to show me how she would do it. So it was a very slow process to edit the book and to get it into the shape that, we wanted it to be in. My mother was very involved in that. And it took a long time. And it was also, this book is, some people have mistaken that somehow I put this book together from my father's notes or something like that.
Yeah.
That's completely incorrect,
Okay.
right? This manuscript was written by my father from the first word till the last word. I edit an essay at the beginning, an essay at the end, but everything in between, which is, 99% of the
Yeah.
writing, is completely his. Now, I edited it. I would shorten sentences. I would take some things out. He wrote it over a long period of time, so there was repetition. I had to, cut things out. I think there was a whole chapter where we were like, no, my mother was like, nah, I'm not so sure about this chapter. And I was like, I think you're right. So, we had a lot of editing to do, but it's completely his words. And if you know my father's voice at all, you can hear it in Tuesdays with Morrie. It rings so pure and so true in this book. It's his voice. It's not my writing. But
Rob,
the
would you
editing
happen
took a long time
would you
to answer your question. Yeah.
would you happen to know, Rob, why your father didn't publish it?
Oh, I mean, I know the story in great detail. Sure, it's not like he didn't try. It's sort of, stunning, or people have a hard time believing it. But in my father's lifetime, he wasn't famous, and he hadn't published any books. Well, I should correct myself. He was co-author of one book that was sort of a general book for the public, but all of his other work was academic before that. So it wasn't like he was a writer of any renown for the general public. And he didn't really know how the general publishing game worked. So he tried, but he didn't, have much luck. If he had had more time, maybe he could have worked his way through that system and got it published. It probably wouldn't have been as big a release as it is now because he wasn't famous. But the fact is, after he finished writing it, he got ill. He started to feel the effects of ALS. He wouldn't be diagnosed for maybe another year or year and a half, but he started to feel the effects, and we all noticed it. And we didn't know what was wrong with him for a long time. He went through many, many tests before they came back with the ALS diagnosis. And of course, unless you're very familiar with medical conditions, we had no idea. I mean, okay, Lou Gehrig is famous and Lou Gehrig's disease, but we, it never crossed our radar that there was such a disease that could affect somebody, especially at his age, which is very unusual. I think you probably know, to develop ALS in your mid 70s is way, way past the bell curve of
It
when
really
people
is.
develop
Yeah. Yeah,
ALS.
most of them are actually can even be as young as in their 20s developing
20s,
ALS.
30s,
Yeah.
40s, even 50s,
Yeah.
but it gets rarer at 60, and then 70 is extremely unusual.
It
Yeah.
really is. Unless
Yeah.
he had some symptoms that were mild from the beginning, but just not noticeable.
I don't think so. I mean, it's written in Tuesdays with Morrie, and I've talked about it quite a lot. My father was this incredibly energetic, vibrant guy. He loved to dance. He would go to all these dance things. There's this group in Boston called Dance Free, where people would just go and dance to all different kinds of music. And he did that his whole life. There was no evidence that he had any kind of movement problem or any kind of nerve
It's
issue. No, none
interesting.
whatsoever.
That's really interesting. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. But what is the what motivating force? What's motivating you to get the book out now?
Right. Well, as I mentioned, I think there's a lot of wisdom in the book. I think there's a lot of things in the book that can really help people. There's two things about society today that I think this book really addresses that can really help people. First of all, we've addressed a lot of the other isms that we've figured out are pretty poisonous and destructive to society. Sexism and racism. Those things we just understand are wrong-headed ways of thinking, right?
Yeah.
But ageism still, rears its head and is still pretty easy for somebody to dismiss somebody else because of their age, and we need to address that. And this book is focused on that, right? So there's a real need for us to, publicize and dissect ageism and try and
Yeah.
remove that poisonous attitude from our society. And this book addressed that. And then in addition, because my father was so sort of sophisticated when it came to emotional states and psychology, there's so many discussions in this book about different issues and different ways to move your life forward that I think it can be really useful for people of all ages. Of course, particularly for people who are, past a certain age. I think my
Sure.
father, the age that my father pegged, I think, was 55, which today we think of as very young, right?
Oh
Back
yeah.
he wrote it might have been considered a little older. But I really think that this book can be useful for anybody. And there's all sorts of discussions about things, which drag us down. I mean, one chapter or one section, sorry, not a chapter, but a section which pops to mind is my father discussed regret, right? And we all have regrets in our life. If you have no regrets in your life, I would question your
Sure.
conscience or your
Sure.
ability to remember everything in your life because
Right.
none of us are perfect. My father used to say this all the time. We're simple human beings. We all make mistakes. We all have things that we wish we had done better. And he analyzes this and talks about it in really great detail. It's not that you should forget about your regrets
Mhm.
or say it doesn't matter because they tend to nag at us, those emotional things. And he discusses what you should do with it and how you should try and move forward and what you can take away from that. And we can dive into it in great detail. I would encourage people to read my father's words in the book because he really, I think, offers some valuable advice on how to move past it. But the point I'm making is that there's advice over a whole wide range of topics that I really think is valuable for people today. And as I said at the top, I mean, it's incredible how prescient this book is, having been written 30 years ago. And it really feels very fresh. It doesn't feel at all like, oh, this is from a
Yeah.
different era. I mean, I would challenge people to even find one part that feels like it wasn't written yesterday.
Let's get into the age casting that he coined, ageism.
Right.
What about age casting? What did he want people to know about it?
Sure. So ageism, we're all familiar with the term, but my father thought about it and he thought, you know, that what happens to elderly people or senior people or even people over any sort of age is that society pushes them into one role. So in the same way that
True.
actors get typecast, right? If they can only
Right.
play the bad guy or they only play the heavy or something like that, people over a certain age get cast into a certain role. Either you just have to sit in a corner or your contributions aren't valued or something like that. Even at work, in a workplace environment, somebody who's maybe older than the others will get pushed into this corner. It's like, oh, you can only talk about that. So he coined this term age casting that is specifically pinpointing how people over a certain age are pushed into a certain role and forced to only stay in that role. And he thought that was, ridiculous and extremely poisonous. So he wanted to name it. As you know, it's very important to name things to get the exactly what it is, the concept, and name it, and then we can start to deal with it and we can start to, dismiss it from our lives. So he coined this term age casting. And I think it's a great term. I think he has pinpointed something that's very, very accurate in our society and in people's minds. So that's what age casting is.
Yeah, I love that term. So what are some ways that we can overcome some of this age casting or get past it?
Well, I mean, it's a long discussion in the book that's like asking, like, how can we get past sexism or how can we get past racism? In
Sure.
one way, it's very simple. Just understand that concept is poisonous and ridiculous,
Yeah,
and we
just
should,
even become aware of this and that it's
yeah.
happening, and you are then able to make a difference and start making change.
Well, that's the first step, right? Is to become
Yeah,
aware. But as we all know, it doesn't go away so easily. And
true, true.
sometimes when you think you've dealt with it, it rears its head in other ways, or you have realizations later on where you think, oh, my internal preconceived notions of how things are actually influence my actions or my ideas at that time without me realizing it. And I think that's true of all of these sort of poisonous ideas. So sure, we need to put it out in the open. We need to realize that people of any age can achieve anything, and age is not a barrier to,
Right.
realizing any potential in your life. And certainly people have challenges. Sometimes people have cognitive challenges, but there's people all across our society who have challenges, who overcome them. So to say, sorry, somebody's over a certain age, therefore they're not going to be able to think properly or something like that is completely absurd. And we need to, understand this and put it out in the open and concentrate on it. And in the same way, if you see, somebody and you think that they're not going to be able to do something because of their external appearance, ageism is the same thing. You need to discard that and keep an open mind to what people can achieve.
You just reminded me of something, Rob. With what you just said, people of any age can achieve anything. Back when I graduated with my bachelor's degree in communication back in 2002, I graduated with a woman that was 85 years old. She
Mm,
sat next to me in our graduating class. And I remember she was darling. And I remember looking at her and saying, "Wow, you're getting your bachelor's degree at 85?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Why now?" And she said, "Why not?"
right.
And I will never forget that. And she was just one of us. She threw her cap in the air when we graduated, and it was really one of the most beautiful things that I experienced that graduating day. And it was
Mm,
really incredible
that's
and a
fantastic.
testimony to what you just said. People of any age can achieve anything.
And it's funny. I don't know how much of a chance you've had to read The Wisdom of Morrie, but my father has stories in the book exactly like that one. In fact, one of the stories I love to tell, which people really get a kick out of, is a guy getting his bachelor's degree at age 95
Oh,
and plans to become a doctor.
oh, I love it.
Yeah. I mean, the idea that
Yes,
you can achieve anything at any age is really true. Now, none of
sure.
us know the future, what is going to happen. If that guy, studied hard, maybe he became a doctor, maybe he even treated patients. Who knows? That's not
Right.
the point. The point is to not impose our ideas about him
Exactly.
because of his age or his appearance or anything else.
Right. And oftentimes I catch people in their late 80s or 90s that are dancing and having a good time and partying and still living as if they're 20 because deep down their spirit, their soul, their energy is still that age. And it's really
Well,
incredible to see them
I would
thriving
analyze
in that
what you said
energy.
there. I mean, we don't have to take this too far, but I mean, do they need to live like their 20s? Maybe they're living like their 80s and
Yeah,
that
right?
much energy and that much,
Yeah.
joy of life, right? I
Oh,
mean, I
I
know we
love it.
all
I love it.
idealize our youth, right? So
Yeah,
there is no denying that you have more energy when you're younger. That's just
sure.
a biological fact. But spiritually, I might submit that you have more insight and more joy when you're 80 than when you're 20. I
I
don't
couldn't agree more. I mean,
know.
I'll know when I get there, but that feels true to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that I know that. I would just say it's possible.
I'm sure it's possible. I'm sure of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So, your father talked about some of the top 5 secrets to living a long and happy life. In your new book, you discover this and you reveal this. What are these top 5 secrets?
Sure. I mean, I shy a little bit away from the word secrets. I would say maybe techniques or maybe ideas that my father put forth. I mean, some of them are a little unusual. Some of them are quite well known. I mean, they won't strike people as odd or anything like that. These are just things or ideas or techniques that my father focuses on that he says maybe you can think about and maybe this will help you. And they are really broad ranging. The first two are really almost diametrically opposed. So I'd like to start with these two. The first one is a little bit more aimed towards people who are aging, people over a certain age. My father sort of noticed for a lot of people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, it seemed like laughter and humor sort of dissipated from their lives. They thought of everything as very serious and very dour. And he thought that this was crazy and really, destructive. So he encourages people to like laugh and find humor wherever they can. I mean, laughter itself is so important. So he really encourages people to, pursue what makes you laugh and then enjoy it. So laughter is kind of the first technique or the first idea that he puts out there. And it's interesting one because not that many people talk about that sort of thing. And it seems intuitive to us. But when you think about it, it's like, yeah, maybe some people, really stop laughing at some point in their life. And it's sad, right? And then the second one is kind of diametrically opposed to that, which you will really appreciate knowing your background, which my father thought meditation was really, really important. And that, it helps you calm down, it helps you focus, it helps you, forget your worries and those sort of things. And we could talk a long time about my father's history with meditation and the development of his life, or even in your life. But I think we both agree that it's a wonderful technique, and it also plays into some of the other techniques or ideas that will follow in the list of 5. But it was something that my father started early in life and really increased, especially after he got ill. He really meditated a lot. And as you know, I mean, you learn a lot by meditation and
Oh yeah,
quieting all the thoughts in your
absolutely.
head and bringing it down to, sort of a base level. We
Yeah.
can discuss meditation, since I know that that's a big part of your life. So then the 3 other ones sort of all work together, especially with meditation and focusing your energy. My father thought the third one is focusing your energy. He thought after a certain age, it's really important to focus your energy, decide what you want to pursue, and pursue it. He thought people after a certain number of years have a perfect opportunity to decide, like, what am I really interested in? Instead of all this noise going on around me and et cetera, what am I really interested in? And then pursue that. And when you pursue that, you're going to learn more things. You're going to open up, your world. My father thought it was really important to be engaged with the world, not to sit at home and do nothing, or shut people out, think, oh, I'm past it now, I'm retired, or whatever. That idea, he thought it was totally absurd. You need to engage with the world, and the way you engage with the world is discover what's really interests you, what's really important to you, and pursue that in the world. And in that way, you can have new experiences, you can meet new people. He thought it was very important to keep meeting new people, possibly making new friends. People have this image in their mind that elderly people can't make new friends or don't make new friends. And he thought that was ridiculous. My father loved to talk to people. He loved to engage with people. Maybe he would only talk to them once, or maybe they would become a close friend. It didn't really matter. The point was engaging with somebody else. And this leads straight into the next one, which is he thought it was really important to focus on the relationships in your life, whether that's your friends, your family, your whatever other relationships you have. And that can include making new friends, new relationships, right? But it's really important to focus on them, pay attention to other people, relate to them, and make them an important part of your life. I mean, they probably are already, but really focus on that. And he had this saying in the Tuesdays with Morrie time, when he was ill with ALS, because he was facing death. He used to say, on your deathbed, the size of your bank account is not going to make the least amount of difference. But the time that you spent with your loved ones, your family, your dear friends, that's what you're going to remember. That's what's going to be important to you. And that's a lesson from somebody who was facing death. So the fourth one is, concentrate on your relationships, strengthen your relationships, be as sensitive and as caring to the people around you as you can. And hopefully, they will return that to you. As you know, what you put out in the world is exactly what comes
you'll
back.
get back. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
that's a Buddhist concept as well. So, and then the last one, which very much plays into your life experience, is develop a spiritual connection. And this one, is a little bit, to say it publicly, you talk about it a lot, which is fantastically, but to say it publicly is a little bit more fraught, because it means so many different things to so
So
many
many
different
different
people.
people. Yeah.
Right. But that's okay. Whatever it means to you is what it means. My father's not trying to tell you this should be your spiritual relationship or that should be your spiritual relationship. Absolutely not. If your you find your spiritual relationship in organized religion, that's great. If you find it in something that's very personal, that's fantastic. If it's more, abstract than other people's connection, spiritual connection, that's fine too. He wasn't trying to define it in any way. He was just saying, find a spiritual connection in the world and develop that and make it meaningful for yourself. which I know that you've done, and I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
And those are the 5 things. I mean, it's actually 6 if we could divide one, but that's okay.
Sure. Well, that's incredible. And that definitely makes sense. And I can feel the formula that if you include laughter, meditation, spiritual connections, focus on your energy and strengthening human relationships, that
Right,
all of this will definitely bring about some happiness and even completion and fulfillment and joy and eagerness and enthusiasm and
right.
everything that we use to dance in harmony with one another. That's really beautiful.
Right, right. Thank you so much. Yeah. I mean, this is just my personal sort of view on it, but I think when we're younger, we just sort of do those things intuitively, right? All
Yeah.
of the stuff, not necessarily spiritual connection, especially in American society, but
Right.
engage with the world and focus our energy or try and pursue what interests us. Or, we have a lot of friends, and maybe you're not so focused on family when you're, let's say, in your 20s, but we have a lot of friends and they're really important to you. The biggest sitcom of all time is called Friends, right? Um, but when you get later in life, you have fewer friends and you may become more withdrawn, you become more reflexive about things and hesitant. And I think that's what my father's trying to combat. You can maintain that same energy and enthusiasm towards the world and all of these ideas that we put forward at any age.
Absolutely, at any age, and you really see this naturally coming from little kids. Kids like under 7 years old, they're connecting with the spirit world. They're connecting with animals. I mean, they're laughing and they're connecting with people. Just really natural. It's like we almost have to go back to that childlike state.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you said that. There's 2 words in English language, and my father loved this and loved to point this out. We have 2 different words in the English language. We have childish, which has a bad meaning, immature and petulant, and we
Right.
have childlike, which is the word that you use, which is a very positive word, which is keeping the sense of innocence, the sense of excitement about
Yeah.
the world, sense of connection with the world. And that my father thought it was so important to recognize that it was important to keep this childlike atmosphere in your life.
It really is. And it gets really challenging, especially as we age, because we feel that we have a different role to play.
Exactly.
And again,
Exactly.
that probably has something to do with age casting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a tension there, and I'll go into this a little bit. My father loved this idea. He called it the tension of opposites. And there's 2 things which are opposite, but you have to investigate what is the tension between them if you really want to get to the heart of the matter and the meat of it. You have to investigate what's the tension between them. So yes, there's age casting, which pushes people into a role that they may not want to play. But then there's also sort of natural development in life that brings you to a different point. So there's a tension between those things, and this is
True.
the kind of thing my father would analyze in the book to try and find a way through it to lead, as we've talked about, an engaged, joyous life.
Speaking of engaging in joyous life, how does he describe the importance of living and aging creatively and joyfully?
Right. Well, I think that's what we've been talking about the whole time. I mean, that's the
That's all
subtitle.
part of the creativity?
Yeah, exactly. That's the subtitle of the book, and that's all of the techniques that I just
Yeah.
gave you. There's basically 2 aspects to it, both of which we've already discussed. The book, it's not exactly broken into 2 parts, and the first part would be shorter than the second part, anyways. But the first part is sort of exposing and attacking ageism and sort of dismissing that and showing how it's really poisonous and you don't need to buy into that stereotype. And then the second part is really examining how to live more joyously and vibrantly. And we've just talked about that. I mean, the 5 techniques which I outlined, which my father discusses in great detail, right? It's not like he just outlines them point, 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 point. It's like these are topics which he discusses in great detail, very rich prose, and also using examples and stories and poetry, as I said. That's how you live vibrantly, is to employ these 5 techniques or ideas, concepts that we discussed.
And within that, there is a creative flow and a creative process.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
Oh,
I think
yeah.
that's taken for granted for sure. I mean, my father
True.
discusses that as well. But I think as we've mentioned, he talks about things that are not necessarily positive, things that drag people down. He
Sure.
wants to investigate things that drag people down and how to combat them. So it's not, everything is all easy and like, okay, now I can live a super vibrant life. It's like, no, people have a lot of challenges in their life, physical challenges, mental challenges, psychological challenges. And this book discusses how to meet those challenges head on and work your way through them, which is not necessarily easy. I mean, he talks about
Right.
grief. We have a lot of grief in our life, and
We do.
it's not helpful, as I'm sure you're aware, just to say to somebody, oh, get over it. That is
Right.
not helpful at
No,
all.
never.
There is some analysis and some, thought and some working your way through that, and acceptance. I mean, acceptance is a part of it. If you lose somebody that is extremely important to you, they're not coming back. So you need to accept that. And you need to think about all of the, effects, that the different kinds of effects that has on you as a person. And a lot of that is analyzed by my father. I mean, I can't cover it all in an hour, but I try and encourage people to pick a copy of the Wisdom of Morrie. And I think it will help you if you have certain challenges in your life, emotional challenges.
Sure. It sounds beautiful, honestly. It really does. Thank you so much for sharing all this. And so your father also describes the difference between having an attitude of hope versus fear as we age. What is that difference?
Right. Well, again, not sure that falls cleanly into the tension of opposites category, but let's put it. I mean, certainly we can talk about it in that way. I think probably in the book he would describe it as hope versus hopelessness, because those are
Oh, yeah.
opposites, right?
Sure.
And he discusses. I mean, just to have blind hope. I mean, if you can do that, then okay. But most
Right.
people really need to find something to encourage themselves with. They can't just have hope for no reason. So there's a lot of the discussion in the book of where to try and find hope and what are the negative effects of hopelessness, right? And other uh, related concepts, fear
Sure.
and other. I mean, there's really sections in the book on each of these, and specifically how they affect us emotionally, how they affect us psychologically, how we can work our way through it. Because I think, as somebody, it seems very clear to me, who's worked through a lot of things, you had a lot of challenges in your life, you
Sure.
realize that you need to work through things. You
Oh,
can't
yeah.
just say to yourself, oh, forget that, or
Right.
I don't have hope now. It doesn't work that way with the
No.
human mind. You have to work through it. You have
Oh,
to
yeah.
go step by step. Oh, there's this and there's this and there's this. And after working through it, you put it all together, and then you're a little bit more hopeful. It sort of happens by itself, if you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean. This is really incredible. You know what else is fascinating? I'm also a professor of psychology myself, and you mentioned that your father was psychology and sociology and a professor. I really find it interesting, this alignment, talking about this, and it's really incredible. I mean, talking about spiritual connections, there must be some kind
Right.
of spiritual connection going on here, and it feels
Right.
really wonderful. I mean, it's really beautiful.
Wow,
Honestly, I
that's
love this.
fantastic. Well,
Thank
let
you.
me add that. Then I didn't realize that you were also so accomplished academically. So, when I edited this book and when I started thinking about my father's whole life, I looked at his whole career, and you can basically see a through line in his academics that goes straight to this book, because his academic career was all about basically focusing on the person, on the individual, and treating them as an individual and figuring out what was important to them as an individual, and helping them along. So of course, as a social psychologist, his focus was people who had mental issues, mentally
Mhm.
challenged, not challenged, we don't say that, but mentally, people who had mental or psychological issues, right, emotional issues.
Sure.
And so, for example, his big academic watershed was a book that he wrote in 1954 with a psychologist, a famous psychologist at the time, called Alfred Stanton. And the book is called The Mental Hospital. And the big insight into that book is that all of the relationships in a hospital, like the relationship between doctor and doctor or the relationship between doctor and nurse, have an effect on the patient, right? This had never been thought of before. Obviously, the relationship between the doctor and the patient is going to have an effect, but everything that's going on around the patient, because, human relationships are so important to us and have such a big psychological effect on us.
Right.
And the whole ecosystem of all of the human relationships are so intertwined. This was a huge step forward in
Oh
psychology in
yeah.
1954, and the book was such a watershed that my father got a full professorship with tenure just on the importance of this book. So he was like a little superstar in the field of social psychology. And if you look through his whole academic career, you can see that this is the focus of his whole career, on relationships between people and how crucial the relationships in our lives are. I actually wrote an article for Psychology Today. Since that's your field, I can direct you to it. It's
Yeah,
of course
please.
more general than a specific academic article. I'm not an academic, but it shows that even some of my father's publications before the mental hospital, where he has the same focus on human relationships, which was not necessarily a focus of psychology at that time, and is not necessarily a focus of psychology today. As you know, they're very focused on brain chemistry and drugs, as opposed to the relationships in somebody's life. So my father, had a somewhat different take on psychology than exists today. And you can find that article if you do a search for it in Psychology Today. Just search my name and my father's name, and the Wisdom of Morrie is mentioned in that article. It'll pop right up.
I love that because it's really interconnectedness that brings people into a wholesome feeling. And if a lot of people are missing that web of connection, they're going to feel isolated and like there's a piece of their life. I mean, there's life missing at that point. We need
Exactly.
this energy, this energetic interaction from one another in order to just keep expanding and growing and loving and feeling the love and giving love and receiving love. And
That's
it
exactly
definitely
right.
does start. And I love how you pointed out like patient and doctor connection because a
Right.
lot of the
Right.
times it's almost as if they see them as an object rather than the same as them. And how can I see you more like myself and treat you the way that I would want to be treated? And
Right.
that's where true
Exactly.
connection really comes from.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. That's
Rob, I'm
exactly.
curious, how has your father's book helped you in your life?
Sure. I mean, I get this question a lot, and it's a little bit of a tough one because I grew up with my father. He was in my life, in I think I was in my early 30s, maybe when he passed away, something like that. And we were very, very close. So clearly, he influenced me my whole life from the time I was born until the time he passed, and of course, even afterwards. So this book isn't the first time that I've
Right.
received influence or molded my life, but certainly the ideas about how one can remain vibrant and really connected with life at any age. Now that I'm older, have really influenced me. I think that I got that from him, and he was incredibly active and vibrant in his 70s. It wasn't this book wasn't news in that sense. Of course, he got ill and then everything changed.
Sure.
And then I think today, we have plenty of people who are active and vibrant into their 70s and into their 80s. So it's not a revolutionary idea, but it certainly is great to read about it the way my father, the advice that he gives and what he describes in the book. Um, I've always been into meditation. It's sort of brought it into more focus because this book is concentrating on that so much. So there's a lot of things in the book that have affected me, personally, and that I've really taken to heart. Obviously, I love the book, and I think that you can really open it up to any page and find a nugget of wisdom there. I would reiterate, and maybe this is more about me, but I'm actually very similar to my dad. So I studied philosophy, as I mentioned to you. So I tend to like take an issue and analyze it and look at it from all sorts of different angles and try and work my way through it, which is exactly what my father is doing in this book. So, that's sort of something that's been in my life, and you could say an influence of my father from birth. I feel very much the book is similar to how I approach the world, let's say.
But how does it feel for you to finally have your father's last piece of work published?
Oh,
And that
right. I
you
mean,
helped
that's
aid and you're the engine behind all of this. What does this
it.
feel
I
like
mean,
for you?
obviously, I'm very, very happy to do it. I mean, you may find um, some resonance with what I'm about to say. You may not, because you're a very accomplished person in your life and you went through a real trial. for me, I mean, obviously, I'm overjoyed to bring my father's words to the public. I'm overjoyed to talk about them. I love talking about my father, as you can maybe experience from this podcast. And as I said, I used to do Q&A after the play, even long before I published this book, like 15 years ago. I used to travel around the country when I was back from Asia and do Q&A after. If I saw the play was being performed, I would contact the producer, say, no charge, I can just turn up and do Q&A. People used to love it because it was a connection to my
Sure.
father. Oh damn, I forgot where I was going with this. Oh right, I know what I wanted to say. But so I love talking about my father, but I'm the kind of person that, I always feel like I need to do more. Like, this book comes in the wake of Tuesdays with Morrie, which is literally one of the best-selling books of the last 50 years, or let's say 30 years at least, right? So the fact that I'm trying to get this book out there, it's just, it's never going to be the same level as Tuesdays with Morrie, but I always feel like I need to do more. It never feels like the work is done. And I think that's just part of my personality. So it's hard for me to feel satisfaction at having published this book. I feel happy that I'm getting my father's message out there, but like satisfied, I never quite get there. I don't know if you can relate to that or not.
I think there are aspects of that that I can relate to in some parts of my life where I
Yeah,
always feel like I can change something or tune it up or turn it around, or maybe I could have done it this way to have a different result, perhaps maybe, but I guess I won't know. But there's also a you mentioned the word happy right now, that I'm happy to do that. There is satisfaction and happiness.
I guess that's true. I guess
Yeah.
that's a nice insight. Maybe I should say I never feel fully satisfied. I might feel some satisfaction, but I feel like I should be working on this 24/7, and I have a lot of other projects in my life which we could discuss as well. But it always feels like there's more to be done, and I want to keep trying to introduce this book to people.
I think that also comes from the love that you feel from your father, that you're still feeling from this book. You're feeling so much love, and it's like, how can you give back? How can you pay back? How can you give back all of this love that he had to give the world?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I mean, I can feel that. I can feel into that.
yeah. No, that's right. That's right. And how much love we share together too. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I feel the love, and hopefully that resonates with you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, how can our viewers, our watchers, and our listeners find the wisdom of Morrie living and aging creatively and joyfully? How can we find this book?
Well, the easiest way is I have a website, wisdomofmorrie.com, and you can go on there, and there's tons of links to where you can get it. I've been told that I shouldn't name specific retailers, so we have to talk in generalities. But there's an online seller, which we all
Okay.
know that it's available on. There is a major book chain in this country which carries it, also as website. I think I have to mention one because they sell it specifically. There's an audio book on Audible, which was named actually one of the top 10 books for 2023 on Audible. So you can get it and listen to it. The guy who read it, Steven Weber, did a fantastic job. He's a great actor. Lots of people were actually interested in reading this book, but I chose him because he really nails it emotionally, and the timbre of his voice is absolutely perfect. So I really encourage people to listen to the Audible. And there's lots and lots of other ways to get it. I also encourage people to go to indie bookstores. I love indie bookstores across the country and order it. I don't know if you have an international listenership. You mentioned international at the
There is
top of the
international,
program.
yes.
We're in about 8 or 9 languages now. It's available all across the English speaking world
Wow, it's
in
incredible.
edition by Hachette, which is a huge publisher. They did the whole UK and UK Commonwealth and pretty much the rest of the English speaking world. In North America, the publisher is Blackstone, and I'm very grateful to them. They did a great job. But we have it available in Spanish, in 2 different Chinese versions, 2 different Mandarin versions, one traditional and one simplified. It's in Arabic. It's all across the world. So I'm really happy to promote it. There's big interest in Korea, which is wonderful. It's a little bit ironic to me. There's huge interest from Korea, Tuesdays with Morrie was a bestseller in all of these countries. So that's why they want to do this book. Tuesdays with Morrie was also a bestseller in Japan, a country where I lived for about 30 years. But I haven't been able to arrange a deal for this book in Japan, which is, very ironic and obviously sad for me.
Rob, I really hope that you can find a more full spectrum feeling of satisfaction, that you are the driving force of this book being translated in so many different languages internationally. That's
Right.
incredible.
Yeah.
Give
Yeah. Yeah.
yourself
Well, I'm
a
very happy. I'm
yeah,
very
for
happy
reals.
about
Give
that.
yourself a hug
Yeah.
at the end of the day because high five to you, and I'm high fiving you from LA to LA. I'm like,
Yeah, well, maybe we can meet. We're both in the LA area, and you know me, I'm
I'd
all
love
about
to have these
meeting people.
conversations, and we can
Yeah,
bring your father's book out and discuss some of these chapters in depth. I would love
absolutely.
to do
I'd
that.
love that. I'd love that. Yeah. Yeah. So just to get back to your question at the beginning of this discussion, so it's wisdomofmorrie.com with no
Okay.
the is the website that I created. There's lots of video on there of me. There's video of my father as well, which of course you can find on YouTube. He appeared on Nightline with Ted Koppel back in the 90s, was vastly popular program. That's why they had him on 3 times, which was unusual for them. So there's video of him, there's video of me, wisdomofmorrie.com. There's places to order the book. There's reviews of the book. Everything to do with the book is on that website.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're
I'm going
very
to end
welcome.
this by reading a poem that's in alignment again with your father, Morrie. So, you know what? I dedicate this to your father and all of the viewers, watchers, and listeners, and for the inspiration and motivation behind it. So, I titled it Life as We Know It. Life as we know it is life as we make it. You can sprinkle stars into your day, shake up cinnamon in your coffee, or dance under a shining moon. Life as we know it is as fulfilling as you feel it. Fill it with grace and laughter. Hold hands with your friends and tell stories. Smile at each other. Life as we know it is as ageless as we make it. Color it as it comes. Shade it with your favorites and create music with your eyes. Love yourself along the way. Play, pray, and play some more. All of life is yours to adore. And
Wow,
there it is. And
beautiful.
thank you so much
Thank you. That
for
was
your
beautiful.
energy and for being on A Little Less Fear podcast, Rob Schwartz. And I wish you and all of your loved ones an incredible new year 2024.
To you as well. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.